Hi, good evening. Could you tell us what the status is with like HBO's adaptation of American Gods and where the state, how you're going on with the sequel?
Right now, the HBO status of American Gods is I started out about a year ago writing a script, which I handed in for the pilot episode. They came back and said, all of the stuff you wrote with the bank robbery and the exciting stuff that you put in before he goes to prison for all of the people who've read the book already. And I'm going, yeah. I said, can you cut that out and just make it more like the book? And so I went, yes, I suppose I can actually. Just put that in for me, because it was much more fun. I'd already written the book. So then I went and wrote a pilot episode that was much more like the book, and handed it in to them. And they came back and they said, can you make it even more like the book is? Okay. So I handed it in, and right now, my understanding of things, and you know, it could all go horribly wrong, is that it is currently wending its way upstairs at HBO. The people who we were writing for, who were giving us notes, liked it, and it went up to the next echelon, and they liked it, and put it up to the next echelon. So it's either at the echelon who will either say yes or no, or it is, you know, has one more flight of stairs to go before we hear if it's a yes or no. The odds are very good. I think that if they say no, these days, there's an awful lot of other places we could go that didn't exist. But I also hope that they'll say yes. They've been fantastic to deal with so far, but we are just waiting. So there is no word. There's just waiting right now.
Hi, in the Graveyard book, I find you get to know Bod through his relationships with the other inhabitants of the graveyard. And I just wondered if his and Silas's relationship was based on a personal one.
No, not really. I mean, his relationship with Silas grew in the book. It was one of those things where initially Silas existed because because in my head it was a kind of, the Graveyard book was a kind of reflection of the Jungle Book. I wanted characters in it who were reflections of Jungle Book characters, which meant I needed a character who was essentially Bagheera, the Black Panther, in a graveyard. And I thought, well, I will have Silas. He will do that thing. That will be perfect. But the relationship between the two characters was just something that grew during the book, and I watched it and was fascinated by it and delighted by it.
Hi. You've got a very passionate and huge fan base. Does it flatter you or terrify you when one buttonhole you and says, I love your stories, and by the way, I've written one?
You know, the scary thing is people do that less and less now. And I never really used to mind. When I used to do signing tours, but I used to do the kind of signing tours where you turn up in a shop and sign because everybody fitted into a shop. Quite a lot of the time, people would say, yeah, I've written a manuscript, would you like to look at it? And if it was relatively short, I'd say sure. And I remember there was at least one signing tour where every time I was on a plane, I'd just read the stuff that I'd been given in the previous thing, and I'd get to, when I got to the hotel that was next in line, I'd send everybody a postcard who'd written and just say, this is what I thought of your story. And try and find something nice to say about it, and most of them you could find something nice to say. Not just have to compliment on the spelling. So, you know, but these days, when people say, you know, can you read my thing? I say, can you send me the time in which to read it? And that's really the problem.
You do say in your acknowledgements to this book, thanks to everyone on Twitter without whom I'd have finished this book in half the time.
That is true. And I also thank them, though, for telling me what the price of blackjacks and fruit salad sweets were in about 1968. I discovered that the biggest problem with going out to Twitter with a question like that, of course, is you get, on the one hand, there are people who know. On the other hand, there are people who don't know. It's a little bit like going out to an infinite number of monkeys, because you do actually wind up getting every possible answer from, 1/12 of a penny all the way up to 2 or 3 shillings. And you're going, no, you're wrong. But you wind up sort of enough people. What's great is you go, okay, there's more votes here for...
Quorum for accuracy.
There seems to be a quorum for 4 to a penny. Or 8 to a penny.
We've got just about more than 5 minutes, over 5 minutes left for questions, so
Okay,
keep them coming.
I'll try and give you shorter answers, Sonny.
I just want to know if there's been rumours that there's anything happening or being developed with Good Omens at all.
There is nothing that I can talk about on this stage at this time.
Some of your novels have quite big plot twists at the end, and specifically I'm thinking of American Gods. And I just wanted to know, did you have those plot twists in mind when you started it, or did you kind of think them up as you were writing it?
It's a really good question. Sometimes they become inevitable. In American Gods, I genuinely don't remember if I started it knowing that twisty reversal that was going to happen right at the end, the two-man con. I do know that once I've been writing it for several months, that two-man con was absolutely inevitable, and I definitely knew it, just from knowing the characters.
Fine. How involved were you in the production process for Wolves on the Walls with Improbable, and would you ever have a book of yours adapted for the stage again?
I was actually quite involved with the Wolves on the Walls when we did it with the National Theatre of Scotland. And got to write a lot of the lyrics and be there at some of the rehearsals and some of the evolution stuff, and loved it and would happily do it again. I was happy enough with it that when the National Theatre of Scotland came to me and said last year and said, can we do The Day I Swapped My Dad for Two Goldfish? I said, sure. And currently there is a production of The Day I Swapped My Dad for Two Goldfish that I've not yet seen, wending its way around Scotland.
I'm still catching up on Doctor Who, mainly to watch The Doctor's Wife in your new episode. But given that it's kind of a topical thing, I was kind of wondering what your opinion on a female Doctor is.
Well, seeing as I'm the person that made it canon that Time Lords can change sex if they feel like it, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I just love the idea that every time there's a new Doctor, we now double the number of people, the number of candidates.
Has anyone ever asked you to be Doctor?
No, but I got to be, you know, the joy of getting to write episodes of Doctor Who is you get to be the Doctor in your head while you're doing it. I remember saying that I'd never actually really known what it was to feel like God until the moment I got to write Interior TARDIS. And the Doctor, he can say anything. I'm in control. It was the power was astounding. I would love to see a female Doctor. I actually am not one of those people who go, no, the Doctor has to be a man. It's like, no, the Doctor has to be cool. That's what the Doctor has to be.
Hi. I've got a question about Caroline, if that's all right. I really loved the book, and thanks to my 3-year-old who has the DVD on a loop, it seems, I really like the animated film as well. But the more I watch it, the more I notice the ending being slightly different to the book, in that the character of Wybie, who I really like, takes some of the credit, shall I say, from
Yeah, no,
How do you feel about that?
Oddly enough, I was asked yesterday on a stage about Caroline. I was saying, well, I think it's an absolutely fantastic thing. The one thing that I wish Henry hadn't done was that ending where you actually feel like Wybie comes in and saves Caroline, because it's a story of Caroline saving herself and saving her family. And I would have been perfectly happy for her to save him. And I was never quite sure if that was there because Henry wanted it to be, or if it was there, as I suspect, because the studio sort of went, you know, boys aren't going to watch this unless the kid does something. I don't know. I think it can be very hard. One of the things I didn't like, there was a point, we talked earlier about the National Theatre of Scotland's Wolves and the Walls. When it started out, it was great. And then they made some changes to it and cut some bits and tried to make it work, feel more theatrical. And I went to see it, and I got really upset. And I said, you do realise the changes that you've made mean that it's no longer about a little girl who saves her family, it's now about a family who saves a little girl. And you've got to fix it, you've got to change it back, and I did. So.
Of all the books you've ever written, which one was your favourite to write, or which one do you have the most pride for, if there is?
Which book do I have the most pride for? Which was my favourite to write? In many ways, my favourite to write was probably a book that hasn't come out yet, called Fortunately the Milk. Just because it's the silliest, funniest, writing it was just an unalloyed pleasure. I made myself laugh a lot.